Catholic Jersey. Greetings once again. Welcome back to JOLZ4JESUS. I remain your brother Dylan Niker.
Hello everybody, I'm Karavara Shaketse Ramaila.
And we are with another drum roll. Mrs. Tony Rowland.
Mrs. I thought you were going to say Gogo Tony.
We sometimes do. Gok Tony.
Gog
Yeah.
Tony.
No, I remember once I called you Miss, I think I said Miss Rowland. And Tony was very fast to correct me. Like, excuse me. I'm a married woman, you know. Just because hubby is not around anymore doesn't mean.
Yeah.
Yes. And I enjoy your profound insights on that, on marriage as a sort of journey and a continuum, even when one of the spouses is no longer around. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's the last stage of marriage.
Yes.
Widowhood.
And maybe one day we'll have a conversation about that, because it's amazing to see how many young people are into talking about marriage and family life. And I think mostly because they're so deprived of hearing the truth about it these days. Yeah, and I think the confused world we live in and what exactly love means and family means and marriage even is. I think we really feel for our generation today. But of course, today we're here to talk about grandparents and the elderly. It's the month of July. And to remind all of you, especially those of you joining for the first time, it's CYJ24, aka Catholic Youth Jersey 24. This year, our theme, Romans 12:12, rejoicing in hope. And so for the month of July, we thank our Pope Francis, who has really shone a fresh light on the elderly and on our grandparents. And I believe it's rooted in his experience before he became a pope. And he really felt like he was an elderly man discarded by his religious order because he's of no use anymore. And imagine today he's the Pope and has been for what, 10, 11 years?
10, yeah.
Yeah, 11 years.
11 years.
Going on 12, which he never thought would even happen. Sure. Yeah. It's again, I'm always amazed by that mustard seed concept, when you feel like you're nothing, you're at your lowest, you are the most insignificant, and God uses precisely that to do amazing and great things. So we're grateful for our Pope, and we know that through the Marfam ministry, Tony has for many years, even before Pope Francis came along.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. I wonder whether he heard it from me. From us. Yeah.
He was Googling one day, it's like, Marfam, what is this?
I like it a lot.
No, we're grateful.
No, but he also, I think, gained insight from his grandmother. Doesn't he have something to say about his grandmother?
Not that I know of, but please share with us if you know something about it.
I can't actually remember exactly what it was, but I think he did comment somewhere that also in that message for this year, he talked about something that he had learned from his grandmother.
Yes.
Yeah.
And on that note, of course, we hope that many of you have been praying our novena with us, which is our initiative of the youth department. We pray a novena leading up, in fact, to the feast day of Saints Joachim and Anne.
The feast is the 26th of July, and my birthday is the 27th of July.
And you are turning
80.
Woo! A milestone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
the day for the grandparents is actually the last Sunday of July.
Yes.
So the feast day is sometime during that week. Yeah.
Yes. The feast day is if my calendar, your calendar, which you very kindly create for us every year, the 26th is the feast. It's the Friday before the world celebration thereof. Which is lovely. It's perfect. It works out really well.
And that's really, well, I suppose you are we jumping the gun if we mention how that came about, that through life experience and through developing the calendar over time and picking the themes for the different months.
Yes.
The obvious theme for July was grandparents because of the feast of Joachim and Anne.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I would imagine the reason that they keep it around July as well, this new world celebration of grandparents and elderly, was probably similarly motivated, by the feast of Joachim.
That is, yes. That's why he chose that, yes. But we already had that.
Yes.
For many years, yeah. But you see, because now he's got a day for grandparents and the elderly.
Yes.
whereas we have actually used the whole month because there's so many aspects
Yes, that's a
to
lot
ministry, to the
Yeah.
grandparents. But what is new from his introduction is bringing in the elderly.
Yeah.
You know, I used to do grandparents for a long time and neglecting the elderly, and I would get people saying, well, we don't have any grandchildren. But now we realize that, okay, elderly are important, but elderly are also members of families.
Yeah.
You know, in our retirement village, we've got 2 elderly sisters living together. You know, we have, well, my sister and I never ended up living together, but you might have a mother and a son. You might have different combinations of elderly, even the religious. In fact, in my newsletter this week, I put a picture of Father Barney. I think on one of his, maybe one of his farewells or his 80th birthday or something. And he's surrounded by a whole bunch of religious and a few lay people that were, I think, part of his circle, his family here in South Africa.
As he journeyed, eh?
And they're elderly,
Yeah, exactly.
you know. And yet, a priest friend of mine, Father Karen from Brakpan, his brother had an accident and had a brain tumor. So he had to go home because it's his brother, it's his family.
Yes.
You know, so the elderly, even if they're not grandparents, have a very important role to play within families. But I do believe that the relationship of grandparents with grandchildren, with their children and their grandchildren, is different. It's unique.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, so we praise God, and again to say we hope that you are busy praying with us on novena to Saints Joachim and Anne, and of course we mentioning the reflections of Pope Francis, which he always makes the effort. It's kind of like World Youth Day, and I imagine even the World Family celebration.
The World Meeting of Families.
Meeting of Families, he always makes
yeah.
an effort to write a very sincere message from his heart to the flock out there. And so what we do with the novena is we inject his message for the given year. So for this year, his latest message leading up to the celebration, we add the extracts. We add the entirety of that message into the novena so that it's part of your reflection. And we add our Marfam reflections.
Okay. Very good. Yeah.
Well, with so many years of experience, as you say, and of course we'll unpack that now. But yeah, we thought that we'd like to lean into that wisdom because they say if you've experienced it, you can preach it and you can talk about it. And I'm quite a believer of that, and I learned that in my own life. So maybe without further ado, or maybe before we even get to talking about the ministry itself, maybe tell us some more about yourself.
About me. Well, yeah, I think you already said I'm a gog, yes. I'm a grandmother. But I'm also a hahulu. Is that the right way of putting it? Because I now have a great grandchild as well. So that's another dimension.
Hallelujah.
Because now my children are now grandparents already too. You know, the parents of the great-grandchild are also good. So I have my son and my daughter-in-law. They have become grandparents. So do I have to treat them differently? I'm not sure.
And how old is our
baby is 6 months. Yeah. And she's coming to the party next week for my birthday party.
Of course.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we're having this great big festive lunch party to celebrate because I think it's an important milestone and it's an opportunity to gather the family together. You know, I was born in Holland at the end of the last year of the Second World War. And as I was saying to Karabo, you know, we were really refugees. We were migrants. Yeah. We came to this country for a better life. My mom came as a widow. I had 2 sisters, so we were 3 girls with my mom. And my aunt, who's also part of the family, has been part of the family. And so that was, you know, how we came to South Africa. But, you know, the Holy Cross sisters were very good to us. I didn't really mind Catholic school that much. Lots of people say, oh, Catholic school, you know, puts you off the church.
Yeah.
But I think that religion and church has probably always been, an important part of my life. I don't know. Maybe more me than my sisters. That's just how it was. And the other important thing is my music. My church music, my other music. Those are my sort of hobbies, apart from church. Church is like 50 years of my life is a bit much. Anyway, so I was married to Chris for 33 years, and very suddenly, unexpectedly, he took ill and died in 2000. So that's 24 years ago that I've been widowed. And we have, not I have, they were our children.
Yeah.
People talk about my kids, but they're both your kids, hey? Yeah.
Yes.
So we had 4 children, 3 older ones, like, they're now in their 50s. And then we did a marriage encounter weekend after we'd been married for about 12 and a half years, which is something you celebrate in Dutch tradition. Anyway, so, and then after that, of course, marriage encounter makes you fall in love all over again. And then we produced another baby. So now we have 4 children. They're all married. One is in a gay relationship, and the others are married. 2 of them have children. One has 4, one has 3. So you have 7 grandchildren, and now the baby. So, that's the family side of it. And, as I say, elderly and sisters and siblings and so on, that's all part of family, hey? And I think that, coming to the grandparents thing, I actually do not really remember my own grandparents because we left our country when I was 9, but I don't really remember them. I know that my mother's mother stayed with us when we were very young, but then we moved to another town, and maybe that's why I don't really remember them. So, many people, many young people in South Africa are almost closer to their grandparents than to their parents, because it's the grandparents or the granny that brings them up.
Yeah.
But so I never really had that experience of, a close relationship with my own grandparents. When I married Chris, as I say, we were married for 33 years. We married in 1967. But Chris's family were, the grandparents in that family played an important role. And, we used to probably have lunch there almost every week with the grandparents and the cousins and so on. And so that was a very different experience of family life than we had been used to, coming as a small group, a small nuclear family.
Yeah.
Anyway, so now all of those, of course, have grown up and moved away. And what happens is that they hardly see each other. So I found that, my birthday, I decided, taking over the party, which I suppose I shouldn't have done, but I wanted to invite, some of the extended family that maybe are even living in Joburg or living in South Africa, while some of them are living overseas, but to try and bring as many of the family together, as possible. So that's actually going to be quite fun, to have at least some of the Roland side of the family, who after Chris's death, I must say, I also grew quite far away from them. It was my own sister and my 2 sisters. My younger sister died, but my sisters were that much closer to me than the in-law side of the family. So family is a very complicated kind of structure. It might be a very good friend. My one sister-in-law could possibly have been one of my best friends. But it's different relationships and so on. And the complexity of family life. What we were saying is that church needs to see itself more definitely as human beings, as people in relationships. You know, whether you're lay or whether you're religious or whatever, it's all about relationships. And I think that the family is the core relationship. And I must say, my most recent involvement in church life has been with the environment, with care of creation. And it dawned on me quite late in life that, you know, that sex and sexuality is in fact the life force of creation across the board.
Yes.
Plants, animals.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
You know, and so all of creation has become a much more focused aspect of my family ministry. So you'll find me that I'm changing some of my writings are saying when we pray for the family and all the families of the world. You know, the plants and the animals and the human family must come in as well. So, you know, that's kind of where I am. So becoming eco-friendly families
EFF.
is, as you know, what I am busy with at the moment. Yeah.
Wow. You mentioned something. You said in Holland you celebrate 12
and a half years,
12 and a half years of marriage. What's the significance of that?
Well, I suppose
particular
it's halfway
time
to
frame?
25, you know.
Oh,
It's an
okay.
excuse for a party.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, we had a celebration. It was about a couple of weeks after we did our marriage encounter weekend, and we were like all, you know, over the top there. So we had to get the priest who was involved with that and our children to do a little concert, and they did, yes, in those days, you know. They don't do that now.
Yeah, we don't celebrate marriage
Yeah.
that much these
Yeah.
days.
They did a little show. They did Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, which is what we
Beautiful.
were busy with in our musical side of life.
I see.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And you know, those things were much more important as our children were growing up. I'm not sure whether our children with their children, in other words, my grandchildren, are not, they're not that close to me. You know, I'm not that sort of granny that's, you know, always involved with the kids. I actually had to make an effort to start a WhatsApp group for the grandchildren. And then I had to have a different one for the young grandchildren.
Oh.
And, you know, but then even then, I sent them one of my stories about the story of the pangolins. You know, the pangolins that are the most threatened species. So I'm involving them in my in my ministry, if you like.
Yes, and your passion. You're passing on a legacy. That's beautiful.
Because truly, I think there's a hunger amongst young people for us to actually speak about marriage and family as a whole. Because I think I was having a conversation with one of my friends yesterday. So I'm growing up in a family where both parents are there, married, been married for like 27 years now. And then he grew up in a single parent household. So we were just sharing about how different our upbringing was and how we then now view relationships and marriage going forward. So it was a matter of, is marriage important to you? In that sense, it was, yes, it's important because when I was growing up, I didn't have this or I wanted to have that. Seeing my friends with their parents, I didn't have those things, and I want my kids to experience that. But also just having a space where we can speak openly about marriage and its challenges, but also how beautiful it can be. Because I think when you look at social media or TV, in movies, marriage is sold as this difficult thing where people can't be trusted and there's so much heartbreak, but there's so many families in our own communities that share beautiful marriages, have beautiful experiences. Not saying that there aren't any challenges, but they have this profound view on what a family is or what a relationship is for them, but we don't engage with each other to have those conversations. So I know that a lot of young people are longing to have these conversations, like with our grandparents as well. I know my grandfather, my mom's dad, passed away when my mom was 13, so she never remarried or anything like that. But now and then you hear her mention something about my grandfather, but she doesn't really speak about the relationship that they shared together. So she'd speak about him being a father and her being a mother, but they don't really talk about their relationship type of thing. So I found that it happens in a lot of our black families, so to say, because that's who I'm exposed to, where our parents, our grandparents, they don't speak about their relationships.
But that's very general. People don't share their feelings.
Yeah.
They don't know how to talk about relationships. Yeah. Now we have to almost force that kind of communication level. Don't you think?
I think so. I think it is important. It really is important. Right now, there's a trend on social media where they say, "Yo, Jolo is difficult." Where people are like, getting into a relationship now is pointless because it's challenges and challenges. You never see the beauty of finding your one person, you know. So, but we get to a point where now a lot of young people are saying, I don't want to be in a committed relationship because I've never heard anyone speak positively about it. But we see our parents are married or our grandparents have been married, but they don't talk about the experiences of marriage and those relationships. So I think it is important that we share in those memories.
So, and how would you, if we had to relate that to your own experience with family ministry? And as you said, it's been 50 years, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we ran the church choir. Chris and I met in the church choir. You see, that's the music side again. His father was the choir master, so we had to,
Oh.
yeah.
What a story.
Courting,
That's quite unique.
yeah. But then we took over the choir in our parish. So it's in 74, we started with the church choir, and I became a catechist. And so that's 50 years now. That's, you know, it's been, but really the family side of it kind of took over from everything else.
Yeah.
You know, because it's just unfortunately really doesn't really feature very much. You know, we focus on specific issues, safeguarding of children or season of creation, or, you know, we focus on issues rather than on the church is a family and the family is the church. I'm preaching, you know.
Please do. Please do.
Yeah.
Did you find even back then, did you feel like family life is already not being focused on enough, even as far back as the 70s, etc.?
Well, you know, the aspect of marriage being recognized as an important sacrament in the church, I think more or less came after the Second Vatican Council in the 60s. You know, I think the church took it for granted that people got married and had children,
Yeah.
and, you know, and it had its teaching about marriage and its teaching about. So, you know, it started then. My father had died when we came to South Africa, and my mother remarried, and I think having a stepfather never really felt all that comfortable. You know, that's another aspect there, the step family. You know, there is something unique about a biological relationship, and yet don't we know that all the teenage pregnancies, all those children that are born outside marriage, you know, they end up in a family, but most often not with the biological parent. So, you know, a grandparent, sometimes I think in those situations, there would be the grandparent, you know, the true biological grandparent, even though in in the parent generation, there are outsiders, if you like, to use that word. Yeah. And so, that is one of the concerns, that how can we strengthen the relationship between grandparents and grandchildren. Yeah. They're heartbreaking, when they, they don't accept our faith, our church practices, and we don't understand each other.
Yes.
I don't understand what makes the faith of our young people work. And I mean, those are the people that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Where is their faith? Are they close to Jesus? Are they close to the Father?
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was teaching catechism, and we were doing lessons on sexuality. I think those were my sexuality lessons. And one of the ones was about fatherhood. And what do you say to so many children who don't know a father? So as you were saying, we long for a happy, fulfilling relationship. We long for a father figure. But do we long for a grandparent figure? Maybe we need to promote that wisdom of the ages in some way.
I think we do. I really think we do, because I have a good relationship with my grandmother. But you can hear in conversation with some of my friends, I'm like, no, I'm going to visit my grandmother. They'll be like, is there something going on? Is there a family gathering? Are they sick or anything like that? I'm like, no, I'm just going to hang out. I'm just going to hang out with my grandmother. I'm like, oh, you can actually do that. Yes, it's fun actually to spend time with her. Initially, when I started visiting her more often, I think we used to go as cousins, school holidays, parents are at work, and then we'll all gather at the grandmother's house. We'd sleep on the floor because there were not enough beds for everybody. So we grew up like that. But as we got older, people had their own lives. They went where they went. And we spent so much time away from her. And then I started visiting her, I think because I was a student here in Bram and she lives in Soweto. I was like, I have time. I knocked off at like 12 today. Let me just go see how she is. And then that's where I think our relationship with each other started growing.
Right.
Because I got to see her and just spend one-on-one time with her. So you see, when we were there younger, with like 12 of us in the house, she had to make sure that we ate. She had to make sure that the house is clean, that we are up, we are bathed. So she was always working. And now it's the time where I actually get to sit with her and just have a conversation. That's where you learn more about who she is, where some of her stories now start coming out as to this is how I was raised. When I was younger, I used to travel so far distances to go to church, and we started to find some things that are common between us. Yes, we are different, very different generations. There's a lot that she must not understand about me, and there's a lot I do not understand about her. But that's spending time together. That's where you find the common things that you realize that, actually.
Would you share, any troubled situations? Like I find with my grandchildren, they don't really tell me what their issues are. Especially the one granddaughter that I know has had quite a tough time in her growing up years. And she hasn't told me all that much. But I know that she tells her mother, and I don't know if that's the same in all situations, because I think so many of the black families are almost missing that in-between link, hey? That often your granny would be your confidant, would she? Or would your mother be the one that you say, you know, this I want to go out with this boy, or he's not interested in me, or he wants me to take drugs, or he whatever.
Yeah.
You know, would you bring issues like that to your mother or your grandmother?
Initially, I would bring it to my mom, but over the years now, I go to my grandmother because she's the one who's like, "Aren't you in a relationship? Why aren't you dating?" Like, no, I'm not dating anyone right now. Why? And then she's the one now that I have these conversations with, and I don't have them with my mom.
Wow.
I don't have them.
Yeah.
with
And that's the beauty, isn't it? It's so beautiful to hear that relationship with her grandmother
Yes.
developed.
Mm.
Yes.
But also how you made an effort.
Yeah, no,
You made an
definitely. I
effort.
had
You
to.
made
Yeah.
time
Yeah,
to
I had
spend.
to make it. Which now is the difference between me and my cousins. I'm not saying I'm better or anything like that, but now because my grandmother and I have this relationship, now it looks like these. You know how the sibling rivalry and cousins rivalry always. So it's like, oh, your grandmother likes you. You're the favorite over everybody else. I was like, it's not even the case. It's because I actually take time out of my day to just spend time with her. Whereas others, it's more of they go to my grandmother when there's problems.
Or when they want money.
Yes.
I think,
when they
you know,
just have
that
to.
was one of my things. You know, your
Yeah.
grandparents are a meal ticket to the future, eh?
Yeah, no, definitely. My grandmother likes saying, I have money. So you'd be like, Granny, can I get you anything? Do you need anything? He's like, no, I have my own money.
Oh, okay.
I'm like,
It's not
"What?"
that you go to her and say, I need money.
No.
Give me.
No.
You know, how often do young people, you know, really bully their grannies
True.
about money? And the granny's pension goes into, you know, what the grandchildren want.
I saw a video recently. I think it was on the news. The video was shot sometime last year. So this young boy was bullying his grandmother in the house, like literally beating her up for.
that went viral.
in the Cape.
And it's it broke my heart. And like, how do you get to that point with anyone, not only just your grandmother, where you're just so violent with them and so angry? It really just broke my heart. And to see that this is what some elderly people have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah. But you know, that can also be very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You know, us old people are not always the easiest people.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that so?
Yes, in my context, I'm obviously not going to tell stories, but in my context, we've experienced also the difficulty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, you know, whether the sort of go between or if there's a mediator needed or what. But I think we have the reality is that all family relationships are complicated.
Yes.
You know, and it depends on what the old people are doing, what the parents are doing, and what the young ones are doing. So we have to work on the communication really, really hard.
I'm kind of sitting here wondering. I also have a bit of a painful past, really, with grandparents, and I've never had a grandfather, and so I think I was touched when you asked that question. Do we have a hunger? Do we have a longing for a grandparent figure and for a relationship as such? So I suppose until I die, I'll forever wonder, wow, what's it like to have a grandpa, puts you on his lap and teaches you things on how to do this with your hands and all that kind of stuff. But I'm thinking now as a parent, how much responsibility do I have as a parent? I've got 3 children, to make an effort from my end to make sure that my children can have a good, strong relationship with their grandparents. And I think what becomes complex in that is if your parents have a broken relationship with their parents.
Yeah.
You know, my mother has a broken relationship with her mother, who you well know, of course. We always speak about my grandmother, but it's been beautiful to see how, despite their painful past, they've both made an effort to just be present to each other. You can see that there's not any really tight, meaningful bond and meaningful conversations. It's always sort of very on a surface level. There's a lot of pain, you can tell. And it's almost like there's a hesitation to go deep because it's almost, you just don't want to relive what has happened in the past. And I don't know, I'm just asking myself, I wonder if that had an impact on the relationship I now have with my one grandmother. I only have one left. I have a grandfather, I kid you not, who's alive and breathing. And I've never even spoken a word to the man because he rejected my mother. He completely rejected her. From the moment she was conceived in the womb, he refused to be her father. And she lived with that pain. And she used to tell me, he's dead. So as a child, you hear he's dead. And I believed it. Of course, you think he's literally gone. One day, I kid you not, we walk in Eastern Mall. And I don't know what made my mom say this, but she just said to me, my father just walked past us. So she knows this man. She's been living with the pain of you're alive and you make no effort to have a relationship with me. So to me, you'll be dead. And to my child, you'll be dead.
Sure.
Now, whose responsibility is that?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Do we need the people in our lives?
Yeah. It's painful, isn't it?
It's very difficult. Yeah.
In fact, I hear they've been trying to reach out to her for years, being like, look, he's really getting to his end. Don't you want to come and see him? And her question remains, why should I? Why should I? Yes, we might say it might be an ideal Christian act of heroic forgiveness, let's say, for her to go to him and perhaps try and have a conversation and ask the whys, the big question.
Yeah.
But even in that moment, in that mall that day, it was almost like he was trying to turn some kind of a blind eye. I think he even dared to make a comment like, oh, he looks just like his mother. Speaking now about me.
Sure.
And I could see my mom's face. It was so uncomfortable. And you're a child. We were like standing in a cell phone shop, I think Vodacom or something. And I'm looking at my mother's face, and I don't think I'd ever seen such pain in her eyes. That he didn't even... It was so nonchalant.
Yeah.
Just let me drop a comment. And rather ironically, you make a comment like, wow, he looks like his mom. My mom looks like him.
Yeah.
And you were disowned.
Sure.
It's a very painful thing.
Yeah.
With us, they like saying if a child in conception, the father denies them or refuses to participate, the child will look like that father, like to the point where wherever he is, if he sees them, they can't deny that is my
In
child.
Afrikaans, we call it gelofies. This is some people would say superstitions. I don't even know if it's much of a superstition. We've got a thing in our culture, maybe it's the same in yours. If a child comes out looking like a certain person. So when my first Jordan was born, she looked a lot like my mom. And my mom very jokingly looked at my wife and said, so you don't like me. And now your child looks just like me.
It's that constant
So it's that
reminder.
concept, eh?
Yeah.
Like, you see, it's almost like God's sense of humor, like, I will force you
show
to
you.
love each other.
Yeah. I was thinking of Joachim and Anne, the grandparents of Jesus and their story, that apparently that they had no children either, and that was also a miracle baby kind of situation.
Yeah.
And
Mary, that is, eh?
And Mary was the miracle,
miracle
baby, yes. And then, of course, came Elizabeth and John the Baptist and so on. And, so the whole question of infertility, the question of grandparents, prospective grandparents or potential grandparents, how many middle-aged people are begging their children, won't you have a baby because I need to have a grandchild? Does that happen?
Oh, those questions come.
I think it does.
It happens a lot. Even the grandparents themselves, they're like, when is my great grandchild coming? Like, what do you mean?
In Afrikaans, jy moet nou plan maak.
You want to
Jy
plan
moet nou
like
plan
that.
maak.
Yeah.
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 No, they definitely haven't. They don't. I'm just wondering, with now that you're bringing them up, like, so they had Mary, and Mary now had Jesus. What kind of relationship did they have with Jesus?
The grandparents. I'm sure that they loved him to bits. Hey? Yeah.
I'm like, was he
Yeah.
spoiled?
But, you know, I've got
Sometimes when you look at Jesus's responses, you're like, oh, when are you spoiled by your grandparents?
Yes, yeah. I've got a little book called Two from Galilee, and it's the love story of Joseph and Mary. And it's fiction, it's just kind of, Mary was the oldest in her family in this particular story. And the trouble that she had with her mother when she was discovered, found to be pregnant and all that, and Joseph and his family and so on. And, just looking at that whole situation from a human point of view gives you insights into different ways of looking at the saints, if you like, because we so often put saints on pedestals and think they're superhuman.
Yes.
But they were, they
Regular
were
people.
family people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the beautiful things about what I like about our Catholic tradition, with us, the focus is not just sola scriptura, Bible alone, but we talk about the tradition. And in fact, we say the Bible is born out of tradition because it was first oral tradition, and then it became letters and epistles. And that's how we have the New Testament. So you may or may not know, to our listeners, but there's actually multiple gospels out there. But because of the church's sort of genius discernment and the apostolic authority, we now have the four gospels that we know, of course, as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yes.
But there were other gospels written also by the other apostles, including the Gospel of James. And James apparently speaks a lot about Joachim and Anne.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I don't know what he writes, but when we put together our novena to Saints Joachim and Anne, when they ask you about what do we know about these people really, they say, well, according to the Gospels, we read practically nothing. But they say, if you're interested to know, there's and apparently some of these Gospels they're available in certain online spaces. And of course, some are, I suppose, a bit heretical and a bit scandalous, and others not so much. People say there's even a Gospel of Judas.
Oh.
Etc. So if you learn about your scripture, if you learn about the roots, if you learn about church history, you'll be amazed about how we can, because it's a fascinating question, isn't it? How was Jesus in relation to his grandparents?
Or his family in general.
And if we come back to Pope Francis,
Yes.
and of course we've now mentioned he's been making a lot of effort to shine light on intergenerational dialogue, encounter, as we say, is a man of encounter. I noticed at the last World Youth Day in Portugal, he made an effort to also bring the elderly in to the homilies, so talking to the young people. So it's not just, he's really trying to sensitize the world to this relationships that we have with grandparents and the elderly. And I'm just wondering, I don't know, based on these reflections he has been writing over the last 3 years since this World Day for Grandparents and Elderly has now been instituted formally, what is there anything particular that stands out to you? If I can quickly share with you, for example, at World Youth Day, in one of his homilies, he said, we should see our grandparents and our elders as the roots of our joy.
Roots of our joy.
Yes.
Okay.
And he spoke, of course, about our Christian joy.
Yeah.
And I think he was particularly speaking into how our grandparents are the roots of our faith, how they in many ways passed it on. And I must say, as someone who doesn't have a great relationship with his grandmother, that's the one thing I found my grandmother stood for a lot in our family, was you must go to church and you must serve God, and you must be, you must avail yourself, you must be present, you must show up. That this, being part of this thing that we call church is just, it's important. It's important.
Yeah, you see, I've never taken the line. In fact, we as a family, as Chris and I, never really forced our children to do, not to go to church. I mean, they happened to be, we as a family went to church, were involved in things, but never forcing them to go, or telling the grandchildren they have to do that, or they have to go this, or they have to whatever. And that, I think, for very many grandparents, that is a very painful situation. is that our children and beyond them, our grandchildren, do they have faith? You know, they might be good people, but do they have faith? I find that painful, really painful. We've not forced them. They make their choices. But I think that that's a common experience today in society, in the church.
I think they have faith. It's just there's a difference in how we express ourselves when it comes to our faith. So a lot of our grandparents will go to church on a Sunday or on a weekday to clean, to just give hands, to just be present in the church. Whereas now, I think a lot of the young people are encouraged to be church outside of the actual church yard, so to say. So it's more social media, your YouTube channels, lives where there's a preacher that you like in the USA. So instead
But
of
not necessarily Catholic.
not
You
necessarily
see,
Catholic.
that's a worry, hey? That our young people are exposed to so many kind of spiritual expressions that, you know, is the church going to survive all this? That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
You know, are our young people all wanting to be Pentecostals or joining, you know, some... They're not going to the Zionist church, I don't think.
Yeah.
You know, that would be possibly too restrictive for them. I think they're looking for a church that's less restrictive than the Catholic Church. You know, they're looking for easy religion, whereas we, you know, had to
feel
put
good
up
religion.
with... Yeah. So I'm not sure, you know, how we can... And can the relationship, I think that was one of your questions, the relationship with young people and their grandparents, in a way, can that somehow nourish the faith of these young people? I would like to think so, but I'm not sure at all.
I think in profound ways. I don't know if I've shared this before, but me pursuing my vocation, particularly as a lay missionary, that was very much, and I think without her even knowing, my grandmother was such an instrument that God used in that regard, prophetically speaking, and not even so much by sort of word of mouth. Yes, she used to drop comments about how she'd love us to be priests, and, you know, these ones in the family must be priests, and rather prophetically, she kept giving me these things, these church things, these Catholic things, right? Whether it's your sacramentals, whether it's your stuff, that has always kept me close to the church. And then, as I say, rather prophetically led to me starting my discernment journey of this missionary vocation that I felt very strongly called to. And it's been rather profound how they can pass that on. Roots of joy, roots of faith.
I think with me as well, my grandmother has played an instrumental role in my faith and my spirituality. I think we were not necessarily forced to be at church on Sundays, but she encouraged it because in who she was or who she is, because she loved church so much. So she'd be like, yeah, if you're gonna sleep, Bushem, that is so sad for you that you're sleeping when you can go to this place that has so much love and so much joy, you know. She encouraged it so much that you wanted to be in church. I think my missal that I use every day, my grand bought for me.
Yes.
The hymn books that I use, my grand gave to me. So aside from just ours having our own relationship, my relationship with faith also kind of comes from her. Yes, my mom is also very involved in the church, but my grandmother has been that person that I could always go back to.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and in fact, where your mom got it from as well.
Exactly.
If I can speak for my wife, my wife's great grandmother was apparently such a staunch Catholic that she prayed constantly. So when my mother-in-law speaks about her, she says, all I remember about that woman is she used to sit and pray. the rosary. And apparently on her dying bed, the one person she called for was my mother-in-law. And it was almost like my mother-in-law said it felt like she wants to pass on the sort of final wish or what, her blessings. They say pass on her blessings. And then my grandmother-in-law became also equally staunch, raised my wife and them in that beautiful tradition. My mother-in-law, very much in touch with her Catholic faith. And it's just been beautiful to see how it comes through the generations.
Is that the future? I think that was one of your questions here, hey?
Well, yeah,
How
especially
can young people build better relationships with their elderly? So, you know, we as elderly, as grandparents, reach out to them, but do they want to reach out to us? And then I think another question that you had that kind of, well, you say, what's the good news, hey? I don't believe that there is, I may be wrong, but I don't believe that there's enough awareness in the youth that the older people are lonely, that they need them, that we have something to offer. I sometimes feel used by my grandchildren. You know, they'll contact me when they want something. They don't, you know, like you say, you go and visit them. You know, what can you in your youth ministry do to promote, you know, the value of building a relationship with your grandparents? And I suppose from my point of view, I also need to look at, you know, how can we reach out and try to understand our youth better? Because I find it difficult to relate to the youth because they're just in a different world.
Yeah. Well, this very conversation is part of the steps towards that. My question is, are they listening? Are they even gonna watch this? Because our views are a bit disappointing, and that's my issue in a great way with today's young people. Might I say, they're hungry for the faith, but they don't seem to do much to satisfy that hunger. And when I say the faith, I mean the facets, the aspects thereof. They're not very intentional about engaging in these conversations to equip themselves with this awareness that you even speak of. There's a lot out there. There's a lot. I'm a YouTuber, and I mean that from both sides, from both a content creator and a someone who engages with various conversations and podcasts around the world globally. And there's so much to learn. I believe it's absolutely true that we are drowning in resources, but drowning in a good way. And I think we need to prayerfully discern and try to listen to the voice of the Lord, listen to the Spirit leading us to the spaces where we can grow, we can have these encounters, where we can have this dialogue like we're even having now, because this is even enriching for us, right? So we're not just making this podcast for the listeners. This enriches us. We are enriched by your experience. I'm enriched by Karabo's experience. I would hope I have something to offer as well. This is meaningful. We need to be intentional about having these conversations, these encounters. Pope Francis emphasizes it all the time. He emphasized it again at World Youth Day. He said, you just don't understand the riches you can gain in your life's journey by not being afraid to encounter people, dialogue with them, being intentional about building a relationship with them. So is there good news then? What's the good news to you, let me ask?
Sure. Well, I said to myself there, the good news is there is possible awareness available, which I think was exactly what you've said. But I wonder whether choosing something relevant for them, like, you know, the environmental, the ecological care of creation, whatever you want to call it, and working together across the generations on a project gives a different, it's not just go to church to pray, that you go to church because God is the creator, and there's, you know, there's something to be gained from doing this together, you know, across the ages. I think that the good news could, for me, you know, when I sit with my EFF, if you like, if I can sell that idea, and send, like I was saying that I wrote my pangolin story about extinction, and sent it to them, and then I'm going to the Pilansberg next week. Well, not next week, but soon.
Yeah.
And some of the family will be there, and my granddaughter will be there, and so if I can share with her that interest in caring for creation, then that can enrich us both. Young people have a lot of knowledge that they pick up as well about environmental issues that we older ones don't even know about, that stuff they learn at school and at university, and all the scientific stuff. So I think the good news is that there is relevance in the current spiritual, social, psychological, if you like, needs in the faith, in religion, in spirituality. But because I'm really, I'm not a daily mass goer. I'm not, one that prays the rosary regularly. My spirituality is around life.
Yeah.
And if that can be the thing that brings us together, then I hope that will be good news for both of us.
That's great. Focus on the common ground. Yeah. Even if there's hurt, there's pain, there's misunderstanding. Let's see where we can start, even in a small way, and grow from there. Well, thank you.
Thank you for asking me.
Thank you so much. I think what you said in terms of like grandparents being lonely, I think a lot of us don't actually think about that aspect. It's like they've lived their life, they're okay. That we forget that they are human still, still very present. So it's a reminder to not look at your grandparents or parents as these people who have everything all figured out, who are great and just fine with whatever's happening, but actually consider how they might be feeling as well, and on a daily basis. Sometimes you speak and make comments and you don't take into consideration how that makes someone feel. So taking that time to understand each other, to care for each other, I think it's very, very important. Thank you.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's
God
continue
bless
rejoicing in hope.
Yeah,
God
rejoicing in
bless you
hope.
too.
Yes.
Amen.
Rejoicing, what?
Hope.
Rejoicing in hope. Yes.
Yes.
What did you say? That other one, the joy of? No, Pope Francis
The
is
roots of joy.
the roots of joy.
See our grandparents and our elders
the
as the roots of
joy.
joy. Amen.
I like that.
Amen.
Yeah, yeah.
See you next time.
We out.
Ciao.